Hello, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Simmons, and I'm a clinical mental health counseling master's level student at West Virginia University. For the purposes of this film, I would like to share something with you called the Triune Hand and Brain Model, developed by a man named Dan Siegel. And for the purposes of this film, I would like to present this information as if I were sharing it with the population of 65 years plus. So, let's get started. So, I would like to share with you a model of our brains. It's not a physical plastic model, but however, it's simply our hands. I know it sounds a little weird, but just bear with me. So this model is represented by our elbows up through our forearms into the palm of our hands and our fingers. And this is pretty much, our hand is our brain, and the arm is the spinal cord, and you can imagine arms here and legs here. So this is the body, and this is the head. And this model is really helpful in understanding how our bodies work and how our brains work with our bodies to communicate information and to interpret information, and how we experience various things such as emotion, or how our brains tell us to do things like sleep and eat and self-regulate. So, if you are still willing to go over this information with me, I would like to start with our spinal cord. Our spinal cord, as I'm sure you know, is in our back. And the purposes of the spinal cord are to receive information from the outside periphery, such as our arms or our legs, and send those signals up into our brains to be interpreted. This is very important to recognize, as we know that our spinal cords and our brains are connected. So, going up from the spinal cord, we reach this part, and this is called the brain stem. The brain stem is actually right at the base of our skull and at the top of our necks. The purpose of the brain stem is to do things that are automatic, such as digest, sleep, eat, reproduce. All of those functions are done down here. And this was the first part of our brains that evolved over time, and therefore it is we call it limbic, meaning that it is reptilian, that the reptiles do these things. The reptiles just do those simple functions to stay alive, and that's what this part of our brain does. I think it's important to note that another very valuable part of this function of this part of our brain is the fight, flight, or freeze response. I'm not sure if you've heard about these responses, but they come from this brainstem part of our brain. And these functions were created to help us survive. An example of someone who might experience the fight, flight, or freeze response in this part of their brain may be when you experience the death of a loved one, and it's so hard to process, you just can't. And all you can do is just sleep and eat and just take it day by day. Another example of experiencing this part of the brain's functions may be when you're so sick. And sometimes when we're so sick, all we can do is just lay in bed and heal. We can't do our daily activities. Sometimes you feel like you're not ourselves. And that's because this part of our brain is activated and just keeping us alive. This is also called the bottom part of the brain. And going up from that is the middle brain. This is also called the mammalian brain, as through evolution, this part of our brain was developed second. What's really amazing about the mammalian brain is that this is the part of our brain that experiences emotion, that experiences things like attachment. And we call it mammalian as mammals, such as humans or dogs or cats, we're able to experience emotion, whereas reptiles, they are not. So when we're experiencing emotions, that's coming from this part of our brain. Going on to the top part of the brain is the cortex. The cortex is the most evolved part of our brains. And this is I like to think of it as executive functioning part of our brains. And this part can be divided into the right and left hemispheres. The right hemisphere, interestingly, describes the world around us. This part of our brain sees things through images, art, music, objects, colors. All of those things are interpreted in this side of the brain. However, the left side of our brain explains the world around us. This is things like literature and reading and writing and communicating. That is the left side of the brain. In addition, there is the prefrontal cortex, and that is the most frontal part of the brain. And this is the most high executive functioning, and this is how we interpret detailed information and analyze material and weigh consequences and do all of these things that are amazing and make humans so outstanding and how we can create things. So, why does all this matter, you may be asking? This is important because not only understanding what the parts of our brain do and how they affect us, but also how we can use this information to help us at times when we flip our lid. I'm sure you've heard the term flip your lid, but quite literally, it's almost as if we are going offline. You notice the cortex part of the brain, when I flip my lid, is no longer attached to the mammalian or the limbic part of the brain, brainstem and body. This part has gone offline. Let me give you an example. Have you ever been driving and someone cut you off and it just makes you so mad? You just start screaming and yelling out of anger and frustration. You can't take it. It's because your lid's flipped. Your cortex is no longer online to self-regulate these lower parts of your body. However, through understanding this information, we can apply it to recognize when maybe we're starting to slowly go offline. Let me give you another example. Back to the example of the loss of a loved one. A lot of people have experienced the loss of a loved one and said, I don't even remember that week. I just wasn't myself. I didn't want to eat. I didn't want to do anything. Their lid was flipped, but their mammalian part wasn't even there. They were no longer experiencing emotions because it was too hard to bear. So, as I said, by recognizing how the brain works and how we can flip our lids, we can also understand that we don't have to flip our lids, and if we begin to recognize, oh, I'm getting really frustrated, my lid's starting to flip, we can take a step back, take a deep breath, and think before we act and allow full integration between body, brain, and mind. I hope you found this presentation helpful. Thank you.